Hey everyone, Mrhappy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mrhappy, aka Mrhappy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. I am beat right now. My raid team decided to do a 2 a.m. wake up on the Sunday before, the day I record this. And I normally I don't adjust my sleep schedule at all for Ultimate. I just sleep really early the night before, and I only stay awake for like 10 hours out of the entire day. So I end up with in probably about a 24-hour time frame, I probably end up asleep closer to, let's see, 6 a.m., go to sleep before, I don't know, 10 hours I'm awake total in the 24 hours. So I end up getting a massive amount of sleep the night before. So doing that twice in a row is just kind of weird for me because I effectively did that last night going into today, and then I'll do the same tomorrow going into Tuesday. Either way, Ultimate's this Tuesday, and it's going to be a time. I actually had to tell my team that I have a sponsored stream on December 6th. So I was like, if we're not done by December 6th, I just need a few hours to do a sponsored thing. Because PoE 2 is that day. And while I don't know if the servers will work, history would dictate not. I have a sponsored thing for that on December 6th. So I'll be trying to play Elemental Monk that day. Hopefully we're done before December 6th. Because I actually want to spend that whole weekend potentially playing as long as the servers work for Path of Exile 2. So fingers crossed that actually ends up being what happens. Then I got to figure out what I'm doing for chaotic. But I'm going to lightning round today because I'm tired, and I don't want to do a lot of work. So that's it. I'm just going to lightning round. That means there's not going to be the question text at the bottom. I'm just going to read things and answer them. And I actually saw there's quite a lot of questions, so it might be for the better if I do this anyway. So that's the plan. As for this video, I may or may not attach a Magic Spoon ad to this video real quick, just because so Magic Spoon, my stuff didn't get here till kind of late in the month, so I'm cramming all my Magic Spoon stuff right before Ultimate. Whether or not I do though, I'm not 100% sure yet. So if it cuts to a Magic Spoon ad before the Q&A begins, then cool, I gave you the heads up here. If it doesn't, then then I decided not to do it. Either way, it's not really the most important thing. However, also thanks to the sponsors on Patreon for supporting. Nobody has to support over there. All my content's available for free. Nothing's pay gated. I just have options. That's all. Anyway, like I said, I'm super beat, so let's get into the Q&A. Oh, Magic Spoon ad or not, either here and then, yeah, I explained it. So let's go. So funnily enough, apparently last week, one of the questions I got, somebody was asking about a feature that worked for them on the Saturday before patch, and then after patch, they said it wasn't working. I guess I didn't understand what the feature they were talking about was, because I thought that when you click your duty list, something it pulls up your quest list. Maybe that's not what they were referring to, because I only kind of remember the question. But apparently that was an enhancement that they didn't realize. Those break every patch, the enhancements. So the person just had no idea, wow, I just thought the game worked that way. That's pretty funny, actually. So we had a question here. Prog stew being removed from the menu. What meal prep? I have a ton of pre-cooked meats from a service called Just Meats. They just ship a bunch of pre-cooked meats, so they're in the freezer. I'll take them out day by day, thaw them. And then I have tons of vegetables, fruits, snacks. I have wasabi soy almonds that were on sale. I have beef jerky bags. I have protein shakes. I also bought a walking pad. You can barely see it behind me, so I can actually get some leg movement in whenever we're on a short break or even on a slightly longer break if I have time. But Progsta is the thing I'm going to make. It's effectively just ground bison, fat-free mozzarella cheese, and chickpea pasta with a tomato sauce, a roasted garlic tomato sauce. So that's going to be the big thing that I make instead. And it's nice and easy. It doesn't take as long. It heats up fine. Pastas, chickpea pasta is not great. But if it just needs to effectively sate me, then it should be fine. Juno isn't a solo instance. In other words, you can see other players there. They seem to be hinting at more of Juno opening up. They might make it larger. They might make lower Juno larger, open it up more. But they're definitely not giving us a full city to hang out in. They've done this before. Most of the instances we get from raid stuff are not solo instances. We've had a few that are the previous Alliance raid one is. Almost all the 8-man ones aren't. They're shared spaces between other people. So more often than not, we've had the shared spaces. I just wouldn't be surprised to see them actually open up maybe a tiny bit more of lower Juno as well. Were you disappointed in the lack of the hardest to beat in the Pandemonium epilogue? Only kind of, but only because it was the only thing that made sense to me. Then when I did it, I was like, oh, they were just doing that. It's not a big deal. So disappointed? Not really. We've been told it has no power anymore. I still don't feel good about us not being the ones with it, but I guess maybe they were telling the truth about that. Then we had this one. I had to scroll down quite a bit for this one. After playing Juno, I kind of started thinking about what if 14 did a full expansion of Van Veal. They're not going to. It just, let's see, all the zones that are hypothetical expansion are all field operation zones. And yeah, they would never do something like this. There are what ifs I can operate within, but this is literally a what if we changed our entire game's leveling rules for an entire expansion. And obviously they're not gonna drastically change it over to that capacity. Like even when we go above level 100, whatever system they come up with, it will be exactly the same as if you level 10 extra levels. They could color it in a few different ways of paint. I've talked about this before, but it will ultimately achieve the same thing. You'll start the MSQ at a point of power and you'll end the MSQ at a point of power. And that same process will be repeated for every job. So like these types of what ifs, just they take it too far. Cause like they're just out of the realm of possibility, not even expectation, out of the realm of possibility. We have the next one. By the way, there's been hashtags and hellos on everything so far. I know I'm just kind of skipping around. This person even gave me an extra. Question is an opinion question. Understand your distaste. It depends on how it's done, but yeah. Given the discourse of Dark Knight's TBN and current MP issue Dark Knight has to adjust for with blood weapon stack changes from 5 to 3, are there any issues you could see them with giving TBN a trait or baseline changes that give the shield partial MP restore effective blood price? So even if the shield isn't broken, there's some mana refunded. I'd sooner they just adjust the amount of mana given by blood weapon. Like TBN, I don't think TBN is where you go to. TBN's problem is if it doesn't break or it's misused, there's a cost associated. This is just adding another cost to effectively misusing it. Also, the amount of MP you get back is then inconsistent because it could break over several hits. It could break in a single hit, which obviously you'll calculate out. Most Dark Knights try to break it, like take a single hit and break it. They don't try to do like something and then like an auto attack. Like this is not usually how it happens. But then you also have to factor about putting it onto other people and giving the MP back, which then runs into a separate issue of too many buffs. Like we run into buff culling a lot. And TBN needing to additionally apply a blood price style effect either on you or on the person you're giving it to. That, in my opinion, comes with too many issues that they should address by addressing the buff capacity issue. I think that's an issue that needs to be solved regardless and needs to be addressed regardless. But this would only add to it in the current landscape, and that's just how I'm going to have to judge it. The next one, another opinion question, is on my mind. Who's a big Paladin fan in most RPGs? Our question is, in your opinion, what would happen if 14's Paladin got a raise ability? We shouldn't have any more raise abilities in the game. That's my opinion. I think we already have too many, and I think outside of casual content, they are too available. Like in casual content, I think it's irrelevant. I think in harder content, it's either overvalued or undervalued, but the fact that it's always this like omnipresent thing has been constantly an issue, which is why we've seen so many more body checks in the first place. Because the only way to counter having so many reses and people valuing those res jobs is to have body checks, which then people also don't like when there's an overabundance of body checks either. I don't think any way, shape, or form it makes sense to give another job a raise in any capacity. Then we have, do we know when the additional side quest for Pandemonium? It's already there. I already did it. It's in the patch notes, the Pandemonium epilogue. So, and I just talked about it before. It's already there. It's not that big of a quest, though. Let's see. You mentioned rhythm games. Want to ask if you ever played Rhythm Heaven on the DS? No. I don't like a lot of touchscreen rhythm games. I'm not an Osu fan. I'm not really an Elite Beat Agents fan. I'd assume Rhythm Heaven being for the DS is very similar. I stick to button input games. Like I said, Beatmania, DJ Max. I will say this. DJ Max Technica is a touchscreen rhythm game that I quite enjoyed in the arcades, but like that one, I don't know, it still wasn't the one I would go to. Like of all the ones I've played, it'd be one of the last things I would consider playing. But like DDR in the Groove, Guitar Hero, something with like something that is more like, again, it's not tapping. It's not like tapping a screen and tapping spots on a screen. I'd rather actually like hit an input. So no, I haven't played it. I haven't even heard of it, to be honest. But being on the DS, I guess my thought is it naturally wouldn't align with my type of rhythm game, which is fine. It's just, my taste. Then we have the next one. Hey, Mr. Happy. Well, I've been spending a lot of time since Dawn Trail's launch raiding with my stat and getting into higher difficulty content. and doing my weekly cares of the new Alliance raid. I still try to fit in time to finish what I started in Endwalker, leveling all jobs to max. Certainly a goal I want to accomplish. I find roulette queues for DPS jobs to be unbearable this expansion, and my alternate options. I guess that depends on what data center you're on, because on Ether, honestly, they're easy. Like, if you're on Dynamis, yeah, it's literally a disaster. Even if you're on Primal, it should be fine. But on Ether, I genuinely don't have any issues with the queue time, so it's hard for me to say anything. But you should be doing tribal quests. You should be doing tribal quests every single day, as well as roulettes if you're trying to level every single job and you're trying not to go insane in the process. And I've noticed this isn't there. Wondrous Tales is half a level every week as well. The only level range that should really be suffering is Stormblood, because Stormblood just doesn't have any good level. Like, they really need to, in my opinion, they really need to address Stormblood's leveling range. And one day I kind of want to make a video talking about it, because it's genuinely a problem for people leveling up every job to max later. If they do not want to run dungeons, or they're looking for something more than just what you're doing, roulettes every day, or maybe the tribe quests every day, it's an absolutely miserable level range that just needs help. And I hope that they have something for it at some point in the future. Next one. But other than that, my recommendation is to make sure you're doing Wondrous Tales every week. Make sure you're doing tribal dailies every day. Good morning, good afternoon, recent player, more recent viewer. Well, welcome. One thing that's been bothering me for a long time and only accentuated 7.1 editions is, why are there no weapons for Alliance raids? Because there's already a wide number of weapons available at various item levels. So crafted weapons are in 7.0. Those can be upgraded to 720, and they're normally pretty cheap by that point. The 720 weapons, at that point, you've had 17 weeks approximately of swords, which means you can have at least 2. At that point, it's also then lowered to from 7 to 4, so you can instantly buy a third one come 7.1. So that's 3 720 weapons. That's 3 720 weapons if you played since 7.0. And again, the crafted to the upgrade is just a few tomes as well, so that's another not an issue. Sphene adds a weapon, or the EX trial of every odd-numbered patch will also add a weapon. And then you already have the upgraded tome weapon, which becomes a little bit easier once we get a little bit further into the 0.1 patch. And then you have the savage weapon plus the ultimate weapon, and then sometimes something else like weapon-wise in between. And then there's usually a bunch of glam weapons. Now, I will say this, from an Alliance raid perspective in terms of glam, there are definitely weapons people wanted from previous Alliance raids that aren't available because Alliance raids don't do weapon glams, really. I was going to bring up Nier, and I see that, yeah, the Automata weapons is one that you definitely wanted to see, but then there's also the Archangel Scythes and a whole bunch of other stuff. A lot of it has to do with the fact that item level is going to be tied to it. However, I do agree that if the resources are there, they should contemplate it, because I do think there are a lot of weapon style glams that we just don't have because they just traditionally don't do weapons in Alliance raids. So I think you're right to want these things. And I think my explanation covers why they're probably not there, but it doesn't cover why they couldn't do it in reality, which I think there's a high enough demand for some of the things we've had in the past that they should probably consider it at some point amongst all their increased rewards going forward. At least occasionally, if not all the time. Hello, Happy. I was wondering, watching your Dawn Trail rewards video, one thing I've been reflecting over is the mid-core content like Eureka, Bozia, Zadnor. If I recall correctly, Eureka was implemented in 0.25 and Bozia in 0.35. Which feels very late. Yeah, I think I spoke about that in my video. One problem that like Dawn Trail still has, or one problem Final Fantasy XIV still has, and it's that and I think I actually brought it up last week in the Q&A, that they release certain types of content way too far out from announcements and stuff like fan festivals. Obviously, they're planning to release it at those points. So it only like obviously they're going to come out at those times because they're already aiming for like the 0.25 to 0.35 like that. That's how their development process has decided, hey, that's when we're going to aim for it, right? But that's my problem with it. They should be aiming to have those long form contents out earlier, because they are, even amongst the, like, you have to consider there are people who don't care for that content, but for the people that do, they are longer forms of engagement that get people continually engaging with your game. Not to mention that if you're going to hype stuff up at a fan festival, it's kind of just like, it works against you when a fan festival is like, oh, we're going to do a new exploration zone. And the fan festival is a year before the expansion comes out. And then the content is another year after that. Like, it just creates this like really awkward dilemma where you get news at a fan fest that still isn't happening for 2 years. And it's hard to be excited about it. And it's also one of the more engaging pieces of content for anyone who does do it that is longer form and not necessarily for hardcore players. So it's like, it should hit more demographics than some of the other things that they prioritize over it. So yeah, I also don't see the reason in delaying it. I don't know why they opt into making that decision to develop it for the mid to late part of the expansion, and I do agree they should do it earlier. Hello, Happy. I have a question regarding the next tier of Savage. I'm a new raider. I dabble in Endwalker, never really got far. Arcanian was the first tier I truly attempted. Got my first clear relatively quickly. Nice. I actually felt confident since I heard the consensus that these fights, mainly M4S Phase 2. Well, M4S as a whole, but yeah, Phase 2 is also really easy. Slightly easier than expected. Wondering if I should be expecting in terms of difficulty. Nothing P8 level. Just expect it. Just expect the DPS checks to be tighter. If you feel like you do not perform your job's damage rotation adequately, your number one concern will probably be that. Because if M4S actually had a somewhat tight DPS check, even though the mechanics for Phase 2 aren't that difficult, if you still had to see, if it was balanced around the idea you will see all the sword AoEs, you'll still have to do the mitt there, you'll still have to heal there. The week 1 experience would be much, much more satisfying, and people wouldn't say this as much. We would be just looking at the mechanics and saying, like, was that really that easy or hard? It was kind of in line with the first tier, but the DPS check was way too easy. I would just expect some very similar stuff mechanically, but much tighter DPS checks. So focus on that if you're looking for improvements ahead of the next tier coming out. Hey there, hashtag Mrhappy Monday. Sorry for bringing up difficulty just before Ultimate's release. Hope that treats you well this time. I have a good feeling about this Ultimate, but all the same. Finally got Unreal in 7.1 and Jadestone is really easy. Yes, Jadestone has always been very easy. It's just annoying to farm. Like, that's the only downside that Jadestone has ever really had. It's comparable. We have more tools now, and there's definitely been so many fights that are harder than it, even amongst stuff like extreme trials and raids and everything, that it's harder. It was harder then just because of a less experienced player base than it is now. But it was always an easy fight. It was just annoying to farm because of like the basically 2-minute air phase that you have to do. I don't mind it being easy, but I also like when Unreals are unusually hard because it scares people away from doing Unreal, and then the market board is all for me. So I'm good either way. I do Unreal all the time anyway. Let's see. Your recent rewards video got me thinking about Unreal. Do you think they should add more incentive to it? No, they do not need any more incentive for Unreal. Unreal is one of the pieces of content that's only gotten more and more tantalizing as patches have gone on, because effectively how you obtain every item hasn't changed. It's just the availability of Unreal, whether it be like it's on break because it's the start of the expansion, or just which Unreal is in rotation. Those are the only things that have changed, but every reward is still using the same currency it was using 3 to 4 years ago at this point. And it means that if you wanted the rewards, the Unreal, like the ability to log in and do stuff and do it for it, is already more than well enough incentivized. If anything, most people's disappointment is they can only do Unreal twice a week in terms of getting rewards, but then, you know, that's why the items are as valuable as they are. That's why I can make hundreds of millions of gil, is because they're limited to twice a week. I don't think they need to add the drops from the EX version. I don't think that serves any purpose. But no, yeah, they're very, very sufficient, in my opinion. Let's see. Cleared DSR this past Sunday. Grats. Curious what to do in preparation for a new Unseen Ultimate. What I do for a new Unseen Ultimate in terms of mechanic preparation and strategy. I just make sure that my knowledge of the fights that I think will be a part of it is encyclopedic. Other than that, make sure to eat healthy foods, get plenty of sleep. Like, taking care of your health is one of the most important parts of Ultimate prep. And the people who are the biggest liabilities are the people who have no healthy living patterns whatsoever. Like the people who just chug back energy drinks, like 3-4 energy drinks a day, or only get 2-3 hours of sleep during prog itself. People who eat like heavy foods or don't eat balanced meals or just order food every day. Like, those are the people that cause problems. Being healthy is among the best things that you can actually do. Even when I wasn't in like good shape, I still had good, like, healthy lifestyle decisions during Ultimate to make sure I was like the sharpest I could be. Now, obviously, you know, given the amount of hours someone like me spends, there's bound to be times where you're like not at 100. You know, that's inevitable. Like, maybe an hour or two out of every day I get kind of groggy. That happens even outside of Ultimate. And so there's nothing I can really do about that. Like I'm not going to chug a bunch more caffeine to try to mitigate that. That's going to cause more problems. And doesn't matter how much sleep I get, this still happens. So it's about just looking at those weaknesses and deciding, like, what's the best decision I can make to overcome them, and how can I at least encourage, like, make sure I'm being as healthy as I can be during this time. How much sleep are you actually getting during the initial launch? 7 hours a night. I'd say 7 hours is reasonable because normally I raid 15 to 16, and then I'm not like out cold immediately. You know, like it takes me a few minutes to, yeah, I got to go brush my teeth. I got to shower. I usually want to eat something right when I wake up or right before I go to bed. So I'd say like 7, you know, maybe if I'm having a hard time sleeping 6, but I'm not getting like, you know, again, not like 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 hours. No, I'm getting like something that's close to what an adult should be getting on an average night. And I very much go out of my way to make sure of that. Next one was 2 unrelated questions. I've heard from a friend that Rogue Ninja was added in one of the 2.x patches in A Realm Reborn. Devs have said they never released job mid expansion again. I feel like the problems with this are obvious, but have you ever heard what their thought process was? So Ninja was supposed to release with A Realm Reborn, and they didn't finish it in time. They decided to instead focus on finishing A Realm Reborn and to just release Ninja later. What ended up becoming the reality is they effectively had to develop Ninja for 2.4 while developing Astro, Dark Knight, and Machinist for Heaven's Ward. So it was like they were working on 4 jobs at once when they released Ninja. And the workload is way, way, way too high. Ninja was also way OP when it first came out. It was absolutely like bonkers crazy strong over everything else. So, yeah, there's that. And can I get Ivy Cam for Fru? She doesn't sit still most of the time. So you can't just have a cam for her. She moves around way too much. Next one, rhythm game question. You mentioned you were a Beatmania player. Was this IDX? Yes. I wasn't very good at Beatmania. It was more like my friends had it. So because I liked rhythm games, I would play it. I was better at, like, in terms of like a similar style game, DJ Max was more my speed. DJ Max, I think, was more approachable because it was less buttons. Well, I'm sorry, the base mode for DJ Max is less buttons. The base mode being 4, but there was, of course, the 6 and 8 button DJ Max mode, which I did get into kind of, but I was never as good at those as I was as the 4. But no, I didn't play enough Beatmania to say I was nearly as good at it, but it is the style of rhythm game that I enjoyed, and I did play it a bit when I was young. Not nearly as much as DDR, which I actually competed in local tournaments for. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hello, hi, and good luck with Fru. Thanks. Question to the lack of there being much mid-core content. Something perhaps related to this. I've noticed it's a comparable lack of mid-core content creation on YouTube. Something that's feared. Do you know why this is the case? Because what is there to talk about? What am I gonna say about? Like the only mid-core content we have is extreme. Whenever we get something like DRS or an exploration zone, like anything that's kind of in that middle range, I produce content on it. I made videos on all the criterions. I talked about the rewards. I talked about improvements. I constantly made comments on it. And it looks like we are getting upgrades to, you know, the reward structure of it. But there's no mid-core content to make anything on because there's no mid-core. There's extreme trials. That's like it. Criterions are more Savage-esque. And while they're definitely closer to mid-core than anything else, I mean, like even just like the first 2 fights of Savage, Criterion, and like, what am I going to regularly make content on for that? What am I going to just make videos laughing at my PF groups? That's actually pretty fun. But like, that's about it. Like, there's just nothing to make content on in terms of mid-core. So that's why I focus on news. I focus on guides. I focus on the whatever raid content. I just make a video on pretty much everything that I'm interested in doing at some point or another. And that's it. There's no point in like constantly repeating that stuff because there just isn't anything mid-core to make constant content about. I don't even think that's necessarily a problem, but I would prefer to have stuff like not even deep dungeons, exploration zones that are more long form in terms of content that can be produced and content that can be enjoyed. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Good day, good sir. Hello, and a couple extra hellos in case anyone forgot. Non-14 question. I know you've got a DDR set up this year. How did you set it up? Oh, they just came with instructions. The pad is over there, and I can just plug it into my PC if I want to play. It plugs into my PC. I don't know if I can even plug it into console. I think this one in particular may not work with console, but I'd have to double check. And but that's it. I miss my Cobalt Flux pad. That was always my favorite one. I forget what the Cobalt Flux, I think, has been back ordered for like 3 years. So like they haven't produced any pads in like 3 or 4 years at this point. And I don't remember what the name of the other more popular pad is, but they all have ups and downs. So it's kind of a tough decision. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hi, Mr. Happy. Hi. Patch 7.1 increasing damage and sustain for Gunbreaker Dark Knight. Why do you think Warrior and Paladin weren't given a damage buff? Because they probably thought they were fine. Paladin's still definitely fine. Warrior is so easy to play that nobody even gives a shit. Like, that's the honest truth. Like, people are just going to play Warrior because it's such an easy comfort pick, and Home Gang is still the best tank invuln because of the number of times you can use it in any given encounter. That Warrior doesn't even need anything. Not to mention, Shake is incredibly valuable. Warrior's got, it doesn't have range, but it does have very solid mobility because of Primal Rend, plus having 3 Onslaught stacks, which makes it, again, really comfy to play. So yeah, Paladin really didn't need anything, and Warrior is just so easy and already so good in every other regard, they probably didn't think to add anything more to that. And I agree with that assessment. Next one. Hey there. I got content current towards the end of Endwalker, so free will be the first ultimate I've been around for at release. Have fun with that. Won't be doing it. Oh, okay. But I do hope to follow you and other raiders try to overcome it. Tips or advice for how to keep up with it all? Honestly, just if you just want to watch live streams, I'll be live on Twitch and YouTube, both, so people can choose which one they want to watch on. And other than that, I don't know if Echo's stream is covering the entire race or just their team. Like, they'll probably have a tracker for the race on the side, but I don't know that they're going to be covering everyone necessarily with Frosty on. Most people just hop around streams or like watch YouTube videos that have progress points in them. That's really all there is. I just don't know what's going to happen with the actual sheet that we used to have, where teams would sign up on the sheet and then it would be tracked. Like, I just don't know how that's happening now with Echo and Frosty teaming up. I haven't really paid attention. Then we have this one. Talked about the updated voice lines in the 14 mobile trailer and the implication they revoiced the Realm Reborn, but there is another possible implication. Latin America is a significant region. How likely is they added a Spanish translation or voice line? I think it's incredibly unrealistic that they did this. I sincerely doubt they did anything but worked already with the exact same 4 languages that were already had. I mean, maybe the text might be localized, but the voices, I'm willing to bet, are not. Also, that what we're saying are 2 different things here. They could, whether or not they added Spanish translation or voice lines would be, oh, you're, never mind. I get it now. You're saying there's another implication on top of what I've already said. Because I was going to say, like, just because I think they revoiced the Realm Reborn with the new voice actors, that wouldn't be inclusive or exclusive to them doing a Spanish translation or voice line. I just don't think they did. I think it's incredibly unlikely. I think that probably is a good idea for a mobile game to make sure that they have like Portuguese or Spanish, at the very least in text form and maybe audio form, but I'm just not optimistic about it. Hello, do you think NAPF will ever get away from calling literally any strat that makes things a little bit easier brain dead? I called EX3. I cleared EX3 semi-blind, and I'm baffled at the fact that the fixed ice strat is also being called brain dead. Yeah, considering PFs mostly can't do it, calling it brain dead is pretty funny. First set of tethers cross the ice. Yeah, it's literally like that. So that's actually how we solved the mechanic the first time we did it. I said, oh, just have the first group go first and the second group go second, and everyone. Like, literally, I had the exact same strat as what the PF is doing now. But it wasn't liked that effectively. Like, the tethers just got really, really jumbled with each other because of them, like, crossing over. Like, you have 2 crossing over from left to right and 2 crossing over from right to left. And then you have the 4 down below. And sometimes people have a hard time seeing which is theirs. And it takes too long. And you just want to be able to move as fast as possible. No matter how you break it down, it's an execution thing. And a lot of people just have a really hard time seeing what they're tethered to, and then they do it slow, and then somebody else tries to go fast because they're not paying attention to see if the other person went. Yeah, it's literally not like brain dead. And I think the only thing that defines brain dead is if you stand still, and regardless of the mechanic happening around you, you literally do nothing and it resolves. That to me is the only definition. Like, the closest thing I have to, like, that comes to mind with like a quote brain dead strat would be like, I guess maybe Zoral Jaw's line tether that goes through the room. Like, everybody just picks a spot, lines up, and you're pretty much done. Like, yeah, you do need to back up with the line itself, but there's like, you don't have to think about like anything compared to doing it normally where like groups are doing like 4 and 4. And, you know, we're like splitting the damage, like waiting, okay, first one, wait, second one, wait, third one. Like, that's comparatively, it's brain dead. But yeah, no, like, you have to effectively be doing actually nothing the entire mechanic. And most brain dead strats end up being the strats that actually wipe people because people just can't do it. Let's see. What else? I think that might be the last. Oh, no, there's one more question here, and then there's just some comments. It's a long-time player that's been around since whatever patch Ninja was, 2.4. Seeing this game go up and down in terms of quality for years, in my opinion, DT doesn't really stand out all that much compared to Heavensward 3.0 or Stormblood 4.0, but the expansion that got much, much better with their patches. Heaven's Ward did not get better with its patches. I mean, eventually it did, but like barely. Heaven's Ward is still the worst expansion we've ever had. People may really like the Heaven's Ward story, but it was the worst on-content expansion any of us could have played. Even worse than Dawn Trail is now. It was really, really bad. What I'm wondering is, what would you say to people who seem convinced the game is dying, keep posting Steam metrics showing lower player count? It doesn't matter. Most people don't even play on Steam. You can't pay attention to those people, because almost every time those people post, we get the active sub numbers through like a census, and it's either like the same as it's been or higher than it was before. Like Dawn Trail is the most pre-ordered expansion of all the expansions, which makes sense given after Endwalker, almost anyone who was converted to play the game during End of Shadowbringer / Endwalker probably pre-ordered Dawn Trail out of curiosity, and then, you know, played whatever they wanted, whatever they could, and then just, you know, went on from there. But yeah, you can't mind this. You just got to focus on you. I just focus on making my content and what I enjoy doing and playing whatever I'm playing. That's it. You just can't put that much energy into the world. So that was the last question, but I noticed there's a comment with a ton of question marks right above it. Did it ever... So the person trying to say occur, like, you know, did it ever occur to you, but they spelled it A-C-O-U-R, occur. To you, Mr. Happy, that maybe the content they hold off giving people is due to those things still being worked on at the time it's announced that FanFest is nowhere near ready till those 9 months to a year after. Do you honestly think they are completely done making everything for the damn game on expansion release? So I don't think that person understood the point I was making in the last episode, and I hopefully they understood the point I made earlier in this episode. And it's that they choose to release the content in those patch cycles. They prioritize them in such a way that they release at those times. And thus, they are never intended to come out. They're never planning to come out earlier in the expansion in the first place. So it is not, oh, we won't be finished with it until then. It's that we didn't prioritize it, and thus it would not be finished until this point at the earliest. Whereas if they prioritized it and moved it further to the start of the expansion, because that's what they intended to do, they would very likely achieve it within some realm of, within some modicum of like error percentage, like plus or minus. So yeah, there's that. There's a few other comments here. Somebody agreeing that they released the content backwards, that the exploration zone shouldn't come out so late, they should come out earlier. Dot jobs can be so simple: apply, spread, maintain, and some abilities to pop. The problem is Final Fantasy XIV's original dot design actively hampers encounter design, because everything you design needs to factor into the fact that dots can only tick every 3 seconds, and that your job needs to be as valuable as every other job with that in mind. So like with Bard, if something's not going to be alive, at least I think it's 15 seconds, you know not to dot it at all. If you were like, say, like old summoner, and that was the play pattern you needed, you would be fucking suffering. Like sometimes people would just throw the dot on just for the fester pop, and then you'd have to calculate that out. But the fact that your dot would affect your dot's timer needs to be a constant factor in all of their encounter design is the main reason why it changed. It's why a lot of us who don't think the dot timer will change, they won't ever change the server tick. A lot of us are fairly confident after a decade it won't happen. That we look for alternatives to dot design and how to make sure that the job is always one that functions as well as every other job, or at least close enough to every other job, where the fact that it's a dot job isn't a hindrance in any sort of encounter. And stuff like that is the stuff they've largely fixed over the last few years. Like, I mean, even we just saw in 7.1, where the magic only mitts got a physical component for Dark Knight and Gunbreaker. And so kind of we're looking for those style of band-aids where instead of trying to just do things because that's how they would logically be done, which is what you've said is what they would logically do and what they've logically done before, we have to look at it within the confines of the game and the game's encounter design and say, okay, well, would this work here? Would this work there? Would this be hindered in this type? And don't get me wrong, every job's going to have its pluses and its minuses in some content. Like sometimes downtime fights are massively beneficial for some jobs, and sometimes they're massively a problem for others. We saw the fix with Bard where they made their songs able to be done during downtime, for example. But then there's some resource jobs that also don't have a way of charging their resource outside of actually hitting an enemy, so it affects the way that their buffs are going to be when they realign. Yeah, there's always going to be a plus or a minus. The problem is with Summoner, it actively hampers their ability to do encounter design, because if they require a certain amount of work to be done and the summoner cannot achieve that because it needs to focus on its dot-based identity, that becomes a problem. So I think that's why it's not so simple as just do that, because the game doesn't allow it to be as simple as that, which is something that, again, we all agreed that should be a priority for them to work on, because dot-based jobs are kind of a staple of MMOs, RPGs in general. So it's just one of those things that's kind of worth the effort, I suppose. But I think other than that, everything else I saw, I was just like, that's good. Or it's just like a comment about, last expansion or something like that. So that's going to be a wrap for this episode of Mondays with Mrhappy. So if you have a question, be sure to throw it in the comment section for next week's episode. Yes, even though I'm doing Ultimate, I still plan on doing this. It will be a lightning round episode. I'm telling you now, there's no way it will be anything but a lightning round episode. So please look forward to it. But anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks again to the sponsors on Patreon. If I threw a Magic Spoon ad, thanks to them too. If not, thanks to them anyway, because they still sponsored all the other videos. So all good. And I will see you in Ultimate on Tuesday. Until then, I bid you adieu. Bye-bye.